You are in the ladies' room with Dr. Donica, the only public ladies' room you can enter anytime without ever waiting online. I'm your host, Dr. Donica Moore. We'll be having real conversations with real women about really intimate issues. They may be embarrassing, sad, or funny, but they will always be interesting and informative. You know, like the best conversations you've had in ladies' rooms with your best friends, or total strangers and a physician. Please join us. My guest today is the woman responsible for my getting very little sleep for the past 2 nights. I couldn't put down her book, Stuff Your Face or Face Your Stuff. We're going to have a lot to discuss about that. Millions know her as Dorothy the Organizer, the fearless-yet-endearing, efficient problem solver on the Emmy-nominated show Hoarders on A&E. In addition to being featured in numerous publications, including the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and O magazines, Dorothy appears regularly on The Today Show, The Dr. Phil Show, The View, The Doctors, QVC, and my personal favorite, PBS. I know she can't wait to update her bio after this appearance to add that she was one of the early guests on our podcast, In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Now, the book that kept me up voraciously reading for the past 2 nights is her latest of 5 books. She's also the owner of 3 companies, and most recently, the creator of the Cancer Concierge online video system, which we'll talk about today. That's Cancer Concierge. My New York accent slipped in a little bit too much there. She's also the creator of Digital Lifecloud and, of course, her own Dorothy the Organizer professional organizing services. So I know you're all thinking the same 2 things I am. Number 1, is there anything this woman can't do? And can she get any sleep? And number 2, when can she come to my house? Dorothy is a highly sought-after international speaker who energizes and inspires her audiences to produce results and take immediate action. So you may want to get out a pen and take notes while you're listening. Unless, of course, you're driving, in which case you can listen to this again later. Dorothy is also a spokesperson, contributor, and influencer for Zillow.com, Huffington Post, NetNanny.com, Sparefoot.com, 1-800-Flowers.com, and Microsoft. But as with most well-known women, there's another driving backstory behind her public persona, and it's one many of us can relate to. Like millions of other women, Dorothy is a full-time caregiver, in addition to her full-time career. For many of us, it's children or aging parents we're taking care of. In Dorothy's case, she became the primary caregiver for her sister Pat, who is battling stage 4 breast cancer. And I want to give a special shout out, not only for our best wishes for Pat, but also to everyone else who's listening who's on a similar cancer warrior journey. As the go-to person for managing her sister's care, Dorothy dispenses medicines, manages appointments, organizes paperwork, and performs extraordinary acts of kindness way outside the realm of traditional caregiving. For example, my personal favorite, Dorothy took her sister on a trip to Rome, fulfilling her lifelong dream to meet the Pope. Not many of us could make that happen. So today we're going to talk to Dorothy about her personal caregiving journey, but also issues relevant to all caregivers. The physical, emotional, and financial stress of caregiving, Dorothy's best organizing tips for caregivers, and what caregivers need most other than an extra 24 hours in a day and 2 extra helpers. And that is tools and resources available to help family members better face the challenges of caregiving. And we are also going to discuss that book. Welcome to the ladies' room, Dorothy.
Yay! Thank you for having me. I love your voice. I just love listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you enjoy listening to our other episodes of our podcast. But I know today everybody is going to enjoy listening to your voice and, more importantly, to what you have to say.
I'm ready.
Please. So tell us, how did you become Dorothy the Organizer? And please don't tell me you were born this way and in 3rd grade you were helping everybody else set up their notebooks.
I was not. I had a messy bedroom. My mother didn't like it. I was in trouble all the time. So that's handled. But I will say that I took a sabbatical from working at a university, and I spent 1 year traveling around the world.
Wow.
And in traveling,
how did you arrange that?
Right? How do you just do that? Well, it's by being organized. Right? I had someone cover my position while I was gone. I saved for it, but I spent a year traveling. And while I was no, I wasn't married at the time, so a dear friend of mine traveled with me, and it was fantastic. But as it relates to why I became an organizer, I just kept finding that everywhere I traveled, people to seem to have less stuff and be much happier. And I
That is a
wondered, what the
great
heck is this all about? And I came back and I reduced what I had, which wasn't a whole lot anyway. I reduced it in half and started living a more simplistic life. And then I started to take on organizing in my own company where I was working, at the university where I was working. And then it just became my full-time career.
So it just kind of evolved from that. It just
Yes.
happened. It snowballed.
Yeah.
And you're still evolving and still snowballing.
I think so.
So how did you come to this realization that you know by now for the past couple of days I've been obsessed with your book and I've been reading Stuff Your Face or Face Your Stuff. I actually downsized significantly when I got divorced a few years ago, but that's a whole nother story. But I did the same kind of thing. I just got rid of, at least half of everything and downsized the house and moved into a smaller place and am much happier living a simple life.
Yes.
But what I definitely did is what you talk about in this book. I sort of ate my stress and my anxiety and definitely packed on the pounds. So tell us your story with respect to that battle and that journey.
Well, it's
organization.
Yeah, and it's in two different pockets because I was just gaining the weight, but it was related to caregiving at the same time. So that is one of the issues I find when I work with caregivers is that they do gain more weight and have less activity because they just don't get out, and the reward, and that's what I used. The reward for caregiving was eating. So you mentioned my sister who has stage 4 cancer. Yeah, I moved in with her. I took on her mortgage. I did the bills. I worked on the Hoarders TV show by day. And incidentally, I was also living with my mother and my sister at the same time.
Ouch.
Tried that one on. So I was, going downstairs and eating a pint of ice cream every single night after I was done
love
caregiving.
what Oprah once said, and I so related to this. She said, I don't understand people who say they have stress. If I ever feel stress, I just eat until it goes away. And the problem with that, obviously, is then you're eating more. So the question is it the reward for caregiving or is it the escape?
Gosh, I probably framed it as a reward, but I am reward driven. So it might be rewards come, from other things that I do. But yeah, it could have been an escape. It also, Dr. Donica, could have been my drug to put me to sleep. So if that's escape, that's what it was. I needed to go to sleep and sugar put me under.
Yeah. I like what you said in your book about how it also reminds you of a time when you were in a happier place. The example you gave when you were talking about your father and ice cream, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I did not have a positive relationship with my father, but one of the few positive things involved ice cream. Whether it was in my day, I was a swimmer and and we didn't have any money to spare, so a huge treat occasionally after a swim meet. I remember there was this ice cream machine at the My memory at this point, I've forgotten a lot of details of my life, but I can tell you every single ice cream option in that machine. And this is in the days when an ice cream bar was 10 cents. And I also very clearly remember the only one I was never tempted to take was the chocolate covered one on the outside with the vanilla on the inside. I always thought, why would people choose
La 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 la.
why what? When they could have a chocolate eclair or a creamsicle or ice cream sandwich. But anyway, they were 10 cents each. But the other thing we did is every so often on a weekend, we would go to this store. It was actually called the Milk Store. And we could get a half gallon of ice cream for 79 cents when it was on sale. And that was a huge, huge splurge. And I have 5 siblings. So, of course, that got, devoured very quickly. But still, to this day, I have all of these emotional connections with ice cream, which is really my drug of choice.
Yeah, I could, if you gave me a person, I could definitely connect you the food that is linked to that particular person because I had different food groups and food items that I connect and link with certain people.
So what helped you make the realization, that aha moment where you said, oh my goodness, I have put on X number of pounds, and X for you was 75 pounds, you said?
Yeah, yeah. I'm very short, so I was weighing in at over 200 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
and it's not good.
and what was the aha moment that made you say, okay, I need to put myself higher on my to-do list?
The aha moment was that I was starting to become I was acting out in ways that I didn't realize, I didn't recognize for Dorothy. Here is Dorothy the Organizer, a brand name. I'm on TV nationally, and the embarrassment of being on the Today Show or the Dr. Phil Show wasn't quite enough for me to do anything about it. But when I started noticing that I wasn't the same anymore, people started commenting like, "Wow, you're kind of irritable. Whoa, I didn't expect you to say that. Gee, you know." And then there was this one time when I was on the Hoarders television show, and I actually was working with a client, and I was telling her, Maybelline, look, you've got all this stuff around you. You're trying to protect yourself from the world. The stuff is like a fence. And then I started thinking to myself, wait a second, that's me and food. And I looked at myself and I thought, oh my gosh, I am hoarding sugar and flour around my body the same way that my client is hoarding stuff in her home. And that's it. I just said, whoa, not only is that a book, but also I can do something about it. And that was the light bulb for me.
And how long did it take you to get to where you are now, which is fit and fabulous?
Woo! Thank you very much.
Fabulous. How about that for a book?
That'll work.
I called it first.
You can have it. But I'll be a close second with another title. I would say that it took about 8 months to take off the 75 pounds.
That's incredible.
I joined a 12-step program in order to do that. And I continue to belong to that 12-step program. So the weight loss came immediately. And then everything else started coming back. And oh my gosh, I started earning more than I ever had before. I started giving away more of my thoughts and my gifts than I ever had before. I was much more in tune with people and willing to do caregiving more, but with boundaries. And that was taking care of me and them.
So you put yourself higher on your to-do list. You mentioned being irritable. And one of the theories I have about irritability, especially when it comes to caregivers, is I have yet to meet a caregiver of any type, whether they're caring for young children or aging parents or a cancer battling sister who is getting enough sleep. So I find that I am very witchy with a capital B when I am sleep deprived. And I actually stole that line from Patti LaBelle, so I have to give her credit. I thought that was a fabulous, fabulous line. And she also cared for her 3 sisters when they had terminal illnesses. So that's quite another story. But so how did sleep fit into all of this for you?
I would say once I started getting the food under control, and also as it relates to caregiving again, the sleep is a factor for me because I like to burn the candle at both ends. I'm type A. I like to move, busy, busy, busy. And not only was I, addicted to what I call sugar and flour, but I was addicted to work. I was a workaholic. So I stayed up late and I got up early, and nobody could tell me how to run my business. No way. I like being successful. So that meant more work, more time, more due. No, it meant more sleep, Dorothy. Yeah. So I noticed when the sugar was out of the picture, I didn't need sugar to, pep me up. So I was able to sustain myself during the day without needing more naps, which would keep me awake longer. It's such a vicious cycle. So I did the parental thing, and I put myself to bed at 9. Wow. And I allowed myself from 9 to 10 screen time, just like I would any other kindergartner or 14-year-old. Yeah. So I had my screen time, and then, 10 o'clock lights out, and, I'm up at 5:30 or 6. So sleep is major important.
Mm-hmm. And is exercise as part of your daily routine?
It wasn't in the weight loss, because when I was in my food program, which I still am, it was all about just eating 3 weighed and measured meals a day for me. And I was a gymnast. You were a swimmer. I was a gymnast. So I had this all or nothing attitude that, if I can't exercise and be really teeny tiny, why bother? But yes, now I exercise. I walk 30 minutes a day and that's it. And I listen to something yummy while I'm walking.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, I'm getting into a lot of this because everybody's still struggling with their New Year's resolutions. We're still in January, so people are still aspirational. Um, I have the same thing about I call myself a recovering swimmer. I say I have post-traumatic swimming disorder. And I swam varsity all through college and then did 2 years of master's while I was in medical school and then just completely stopped. I don't think my children have ever seen me swim an actual lap. But I think I had this attitude that if I couldn't work out for 2 hours, which was a real workout, then it wasn't worth it. And what I have also discovered is that 30 minutes on the elliptical is really pretty wonderful. What I've also discovered is that for me, 30 minutes on the elliptical winds up burning about 294 calories, which is about 2 cookies. So my mantra this new year has become, you can't out-train a bad diet.
Great idea.
But the thing is, I hear what you're saying about, this conflict between your public persona and then what you do yourself in your personal life. And I struggle with this because I know I am really, really good at telling other people what to do. And I can quote you studies and research and every reason why, and I could give you anecdotes about 27 people who followed this advice and did great. And then I am not doing the whole practice what you preach thing. So I think that's one of my New Year's resolutions. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, is really to talk about things much more authentically and honestly and openly. Because usually, and you've seen, some of the things I've done on television, usually I'm talking about it from this very proper Dr. Donica persona. But now what we're doing is talking about it as real women and talking about these issues the same way we would in the ladies' room. And we've all had countless conversations like this in various places with random women that we've met about random things, usually while we're waiting online, which we spend a lot of time. Figure out a solution to that. So what's your most interesting or unusual or memorable experience you've ever had in a ladies' room?
Oh my gosh, didn't expect that
question
whatsoever. In a ladies' room, I would say, an unusual experience is someone who's absolutely breaking down in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember her absolutely, this sobbing person in the next stall. And, I have to do a knock knock, and say, hey, are you okay in there? No. And really stopping my whole life. There are people out there waiting for me at my table, and putting another human first. So I don't know that it's so weird.
No, it was memorable.
But it was memorable, and it was a horrible situation of a breakup, a marriage of long standing. But when I think of bathroom, if I'm allowed to say, or not necessarily a ladies' room, but my weird, strange experiences are always on the TV show, the Hoarders show, because in their bathrooms, they can't use their toilets anymore.
Oh, that's true.
So you want to have weird experiences. Those are the memories that pop up for me. Like, okay, if you're not using your toilet for the last 3 years, where are you going?
And what's their answer generally?
A Home Depot bucket out back.
Wow.
Down the street. Sometimes I run over to the neighbors. Sometimes it is just too embarrassing to say,
That's horrible. I actually know somebody who's a hoarder, and she has a very small New York City apartment. This would be a great one for you. And she puts all her stuff in the bathtub. And then every time she has to use the shower, she literally has to take everything out of the bathtub, put it on the bed, use the shower, dry out the bathtub, and then put everything back in the bathtub, which is exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. But I never thought about that from the hoarding perspective. Of course, the other connection that you and I both have to ladies' rooms are the locker rooms. And when we talk about locker room talk, we're usually thinking about men who have their locker room talk. But I've been talking to some friends about what we used to talk about in the locker rooms. and the kinds of conversations that we had. And they were really deep, connecting things. Usually it was about what a difficult practice that was, or, my performance or my need or whatever. But many times they were about much more serious issues. And I've been thinking about this in terms of the whole Me Too movement,
Mhm.
because, of course, gymnastics, swimming, we probably both have many stories we could tell about coaches who were abusive. Gymnastics is facing one of the worst crises
Correct.
right now, with finally women speaking out about a teen doctor who fortunately is now in prison, because he abused over 150 women who spoke out about it.
You
Finally,
believe it?
I
Wow.
cannot believe it. And talk about hoarding shame and hoarding, and keeping these issues in and thinking this is somehow on us when it was on them. And I remember coaches who were widely rumored at the time to be very abusive, and among parents and the kids, and the parents didn't do anything.
Well, and I have to actually say, my mother, oh, she was a difficult one. She's a pill. Um,
Hi,
she'd
Mom.
always, she'd always say, "Now, Dorothy, is there anything funny going on, at the
Good
gym?"
for
She
her.
was always really proactive. But here's this willful child. None of your mom. God, no, geez. You know, Luckily there wasn't, but I found it, she was prying. So what if parents do check in with their kids?
Mhm.
Then you have a child like me who refuses to share
Yeah.
information. But it's a must. And yeah,
I think if you have the information, however you get it, I think what I always did is told my kids up front proactively, if anything like this ever happens to you or somebody please tell me.
I think you're right.
And my children are definitely sharers. My daughter much more than my son. My son only tells me something if it's worthy of being on the front page of a newspaper, or if an ambulance came, he will always tell me. Whereas my daughter is much more of a sharer. So anyway, so now tell me about your sister. And I hope Pat is listening. I hope she hears that we are all very concerned. Certainly, there are thousands and thousands of women who are battling end-stage breast cancer. We've made tremendous strides in diagnosing breast cancer early, in treating breast cancer, and yet there's still 41,000 women per year who die of breast cancer. And I
Yeah.
always want to put that in perspective for people, because we hear all these numbers, and I think we just kind of have number immunity now. But that's more than 10 times as many people who were killed on 9/11 per year.
Ouch.
That's a staggering number, despite all of our advances. So please tell me Pat's story and how you became her caregiver and her life jacket.
Well, first of all, Pat is in love with the fact that we're mentioning her name, so thank you very much.
Pat.
And this other piece that I'll tell you about relates to one of the pieces. You talked about emotional difficulties for caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
and an emotional difficulty I had and still have is guilt. And so, there's a lot of that guilt, and Pat knows about that too, which is why I made such an effort to take her to Rome, as you had mentioned, to hopefully see the Pope. But Pat has had cancer for 10 years, and it's primary breast cancer found in the colon. It just keeps popping up in another place every single time. And she and my mom live together, and I now commute to Texas regularly to make sure everything's okay. And we'll be bringing them back here to California so that they're closer.
Yeah, that'd be a lot easier for you. But
Yeah,
how old was she when she was diagnosed?
she was in her 40s.
And was she
Yeah,
diagnosed
late 40s.
because she had symptoms or
She
because
had this horrible stomach ache, doggone it.
Mhm.
That's all. And it was repeated. But she was sleeping so much, and that seemed unusual. And shouldn't we go to the doctor? And then it was just, oh my gosh, my stomach hurts so much. We need to go to ER.
And
And that's how it was found.
had she had regular mammograms before that?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it had not
Nope,
shown.
nope,
Oh my goodness. That is,
right?
that's another really important take home message for everybody, is that when you're having unusual symptoms, you really need to be your own advocate, and you need to go to your doctor and be in control, especially with this issue of stomach pain and stomach aches. I was just talking to a friend from high school who had had a heart attack And
Yeah.
her only symptoms were she had abdominal discomfort. She says it wasn't even the worst stomach ache she ever had. She just kind of felt sick to her stomach for a week. And then finally it got worse and worse and worse. And then she went to the hospital, and lo and behold, she was having a heart attack.
Well, and I think this covers two things that you're bringing up here, that locker room discussion. These are the kinds of things that I do talk about in the locker room now, or privately with my friends. And the other thing is, you talk about it in terms of symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about it in terms of pattern, because organizing is always in terms of pattern, organizing patterns. And Pat, for example, had a regular pattern of falling asleep, a regular pattern of stopping reading anymore. She wasn't reading like she used to. Her favorite things were going by the wayside. She had a regular pattern of having a stomach ache. So there were new patterns that were occurring and old patterns that were being dismissed. And that's key to identifying something in your health, I think.
Absolutely. And what I couldn't have said it better, but what I always talk to people about is not what's normal per se, but what's normal for you. And that's what's, really important. And some of the things are different because we've changed our behavior, or we've changed our lives, or we've changed things that we're exposing. And some of the things are different despite the fact that we have not changed anything or not been exposed to anything. So this was about how many years ago that Pat was diagnosed?
Yeah, 10.
And tell me, why do you feel guilty? What is the guilt from?
Well, the guilt was from, and I think I do a pretty darn good job managing it now, but the guilt was because I'm an athlete, I'm happy, I'm healthy, my body's moving, I don't have any major illnesses, I was getting engaged, getting married, my business is working well. And on Pat's side, it was like, I have to stop working, I can't go out anymore, I can't date anymore, I'm losing my hair. She was kind of deteriorating in her life, and I was kind of flourishing in my life. And I can say this publicly because we talk about it.
Yeah.
And then, how to manage that guilt? Well, is what can I offer to Pat in my life that can help her so that we both can enjoy, while I can also still do my life, and she has to live her life. And so that's where that whole trip to Rome happened. So
That's awesome. That's really special. And your mom is healthy and still living with Pat?
my mom is 85 years old and definitely tells Pat to get up and out of bed and be sure to get dressed and stop eating that item over there and go to bed and get up. And yep, she's alive and well, Dr. Danica.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And, we all need people. And is Pat your only sibling, or do you have other siblings?
I have other siblings. I have a sister and a brother, but they live up in a different part of the country.
Yeah, I always find that no matter how many kids there are in a family, there's always one who is the caregiver, and there's one who's responsible. So tell me now how you translated this experience in your personal life to your whole caregiving concierge system that you have.
Right. Well, I think that the best way we learn is by having the experience. And even if it's a crappy experience, cancer, caregiving, chemo, car transportation, all that stuff, how do we turn that into something spectacular or meaningful? And my sister Pat and I spent time writing down ways we could help her get organized. She's come on shows with me. She's done some television shows with me. And so I just turn it into an experience that I can teach others. That makes her happy that her experience is being used for something good. And of course, for me, it gives me another niche to my business. I organize people, not just who hoard, but celebrities out here and entrepreneurs who work too much and, all sorts of folks. But now here's another area of life, because getting organized in the face of cancer or any sort of diagnosis can be very helpful, especially the medical records, especially when having to come into your office and talk to you.
Yeah.
Working with medical team and being organized allows you to, I don't know, it helps everybody get clear.
Well, and it allows you to streamline the process. Certainly from the doctor's perspective, the more medical records we have and the more well organized they are, the quicker we can get to the root of the problem. And one of the issues for people with cancer as well as other chronic illnesses is you're not just seeing one doctor. you're seeing many different specialists and many different doctors, and they're not necessarily on the same computer system or the same medical records system. So very often we're starting from scratch. And many times this drives up the cost of healthcare, certainly, because we're reordering tests that have already been done, because we don't have the information. But it certainly takes time, and it's a hassle. I spoke to a good friend of mine who had breast cancer, and she said she wants to write a book called It's the Parking Stupid, because she says there's so many appointments that you have to go to, whether it's for your chemo or your radiation, and you have to physically get there. And now, of course, with most insurance plans having restrictions about which doctors and which centers you can go to, very often people are driving or having other transportation that takes a tremendous amount of time. And I remember this when my son had a chronic illness for many years, and we were going to see a specialist that was 4 states away. And by the time I did everything to get him in the car and drive there, it was about a 4.5-hour drive. And I usually had unexpected traffic and delays and things. And by the time I got there, I was on my last nerve. And the thing I appreciated most about this hospital, thank you, Johns Hopkins University, is they had valet parking. And I would get there and I would be free valet parking, I might add.
Wow.
I would get there and I would be on my last nerve and frazzled and just like done. And the guy would come and take my keys and I didn't have to worry about parking. And it was just great. Really great.
Yeah. Yeah,
And sometimes
absolutely.
those little things that can really kind of pushing you over the edge. Or if you're not well enough to take yourself to your own chemo appointments or your own radiation appointments, you need to
Well,
somebody else to take you.
and that's the thing. I think in the Cancer Concierge .org, which is where people can get the free ebook. It's free. I mean, there are no strings attached. You don't even have to put your email address in. We don't find you. We don't want to know you. Just take the book and share it. But that's where you can learn to, you know, get your support team together. It's about preparing for those appointments. It's supporting the whole family. It's how to get your household running effectively, even in the face of all of this. It's just being organized, even with a one sheet. You know how we have a cheat sheet for things.
Of course, absolutely.
Just having that one sheet and not only have it typed or printed, but also have it, take a picture of it and have it on your phone. So it's with you all the time and you can share it with everybody. Just those little tips, like you say, makes it easier.
So give me your top 3 tips for, say you met somebody in the ladies' room today who was crying in the next stall because she just found out her sister was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer.
Right.
What would be your top 3 tips after you hugged her and comforted her and said, you can do this?
Right. Is number 1, get support immediately. Mm-hmm. Right. So just immediately find who else can join you in the support. 3 people, you and 2 others, so that you have a rotating support system. Even if you have to call a place like care.com, that's an online service where you can find caregivers so that you can replace yourself occasionally, but just know that you have someone else who's in it with you that makes sense and that you can trust. And then getting organized is also very important. I use a digital Lifecloud. It's where I keep all of my paperwork completely organized online. But if you don't want to, you can do something. I'll just throw you this over here. But a medical binder, just to take with you if you want to go anywhere, anytime. So if you like the manual, keep it organized manually, but otherwise go and keep all your x-rays, your medical appointments, everything for your sister or yourself, like in Digital Lifecloud. That's one. And then another thing is to think about ordering items online for family members. So in my case, such as my sister has a cat. She no longer can lift the kitty litter. It's the parking spot you're talking about from your friend. She can't lift it, nor can my mother at age 85. Aha, that's something we can order and have delivered to your door. People talk about Meals on Wheels, but you can also order fresh foods online if you can afford it. If not, you can order frozen online.
Well, actually, I discovered I had some pretty major back surgery 2 years ago. And what I discovered that I didn't even know is that my own grocery store in suburban New Jersey had a delivery service. The charge was $15.
Yep.
And then everything else was the normal price of my normal groceries. And I can order my groceries online and it literally gets delivered to my kitchen counter. So for somebody with back problems, if you think about the process of going grocery shopping, you not only have to physically get there and physically walk around the store, but you're putting things in the cart. Then you're taking things out of the cart and putting them on the conveyor belt. Then you're putting the bags into the cart. Then you're putting the bags into the car. Then you're taking the bags from the car to the kit. And if you think about all those steps involved with grocery shopping, yeah, that $15 is a lot of extra money for some people. But if you cut down on your grocery expenses, you can come out ahead. And actually, I spend a lot less money in the grocery store doing it this way because I don't have any of those impulse buying things. So most of my purchases at the grocery store are not the things that were on the list I came in with. So you can actually save time and money and calories by doing that because if you're thinking ahead of time. I know also I have personally never done this in the past week, but it is very tempting to put my personal weakness of those pita chips in the bag in the grocery store, and then you're kind of like nibbling a little bit while you're going through the grocery store, and it's a terrible habit that you can
Yeah.
avoid.
Yeah.
So tell me about this system and how people can access it, when you started it, and what kind of feedback you've had from people.
Right. So the cancerconcierge.org is where you can find it, and you can download it in any different way, whether it's a PDF, whether, the book itself, whether you want to print it, it doesn't matter. It's all available. And again, free without anything in exchange. Okay?
Is it a
It's
workbook type format, or is it just reading, or is there assignments?
It's just reading. It's 14 pages, and it starts off with what happens when you first get the diagnosis, then how to prepare for your doctor's appointments in a more organized fashion, how to build your team, just it's in order for how you would if I were hugging my lady in the restroom right now and she were telling me her sister was just diagnosed with something and she had to do the caregiving. I would, whether she has cancer or any other disease, I would say go to the cancerconcierge.org and download it.
This is awesome.
Period.
I'm sure Pat's doctors love it when you come with her to her appointments. And a lot of people, I mentioned this grocery list analogy that we go to the grocery store. I've told people to make a list of your questions before you go to the doctor, so that you don't have that. The number one pet peeve of all doctors is what we call the doorknob question. The doorknob question is when you're all finished, everything's all resolved, you're leaving, your hand is on the doorknob, and you've already said goodbye, and then you turn around and you say, "Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to tell you about a breast mass that I have noticed, or I forgot to tell you about, I've been having, vaginal bleeding for the past 6 weeks." And that drives doctors crazy. And so
Right.
many people I've advised to make a list of questions, and they say, "Well, I don't want the doctor to be offended." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Your doctor will love you for making a list of questions." Now, we don't want the list to be 47 questions, but if you do have 47 questions, you should probably say to the doctor up front, "I have 47 questions. How many do you have time for today?"
Right.
The doctor will probably say, "Let's deal with the top 5, and then let's make another appointment to deal with the next 5 in succession."
Well, and if I could just jump on your advice where you're saying that, people leave that as the last question to ask, therein to me is that organizing piece, which is what question am I most afraid to ask that I should be asking? And then could we start with that one perhaps?
Yeah.
So that we don't leave that one for last.
That is great. And one of the questions I love to ask in interviews, and we're at that point where unfortunately we need to wrap this up. I could talk to you all day long. And please come back again next time you have another project or just something to share. But the question I always love to ask is, what's the most important question you wish I had asked you?
Right now, you're asking me that question, huh?
I'm asking you that question. What should I have asked you, or what would you like to tell me or our listeners, other than where to find you and your website and your Twitter handle and all that stuff? But what's the one most important question that we didn't get to?
Yeah.
The doorknob question.
The doorknob question. I would say, I guess because I'm a professional organizer by trade, that's what I do. Um, there's always some piece that's out of whack. There's always some piece that's out of whack, and so the question might be not necessarily for me so much, but the question that I would want to put out to your listeners is, what's out of whack right now? Because especially given that it's a new year, and as you said, people are doing resolutions or goals, I like to think about what isn't working or what hasn't been working. So whether it's about caregiving, or whether it's about weight loss or gain, or whatever the situation, whether it's about work, what isn't working, and then how can we take one small step to find a solution? That's the question of the day. What isn't working?
And I think the
Yeah.
corollary question then is, what's the first step?
Yeah.
I often say to people, if the good fairy of whatever could come down and say, you have one wish, what would it be? And then that's obviously going to tell you what the first thing is that you
Yeah.
have to work on. Or if I could
And
make one problem go away, what would it be?
yeah. And then just what's the teeny itty bitty, smallest little thing that you can do to forward something positive out of answering that question?
And I guess that's my final question for you. So what's next for you? What are
Oh,
your
dear
next steps?
me. Well, the next steps are, secretly, we may have another season on, A&E. You haven't
Yay.
heard it from me here, so it's
And
not
I won't tell
official.
anybody. I won't
Uh,
tell anybody.
so if that happens, then I expect to be out in the field doing some filming. And of course, I have a new product coming out, which is all about how to support your weight loss in your closet.
Oh my goodness.
Shut the front door. There you are. And that'll be out in the spring.
Wow. Okay. Well, please let me know as soon as that happens, because my closet is absolutely a disaster zone. And I keep saying I'm not buying one more thing until I get back to my normal size, because I'm
Perfect.
the worst nightmare client. I have clothes in 4 or 5 sizes in my closet. And I know
And
that
that's it right
I
there. You just said it.
I know organizers always give you that tip that if you haven't worn something in a year or 2 years, get rid of it. I actually did clean out my closet. You'd be so proud of me a couple of years ago. But the parameter I used is if I hadn't worn something since before I had children, which is now 24 years ago, then I would definitely get rid of it. And all those nursing bras were gone the next day. Do you know I had 18 nursing bras?
Congratulations.
And I sent them to the Smithsonian because they were just that old. Anyway, it has been a pleasure talking to you. And I'm so glad you have a new product, because then we'll have a new excuse to have you back. But please tell people where they can find you everywhere.
Absolutely. So you want to go to dorothytheorganizer.com if you have organizing needs. There's just free. Did I say free information? It's a resource website. I'm not trying to sell you stuff. Just come and get some organizing information. Don't forget the cancerconcierge.org. And then for digital stuff, you want to go to digitallifecloud.com.
Well, thank you so much. I know so many of our listeners have certainly enjoyed this as much as I have, but are really writing things down and are really taking a lot of your advice to heart. The good news is we have so many people, thousands and thousands more people than I ever would have imagined, who are living beyond cancer diagnosis. Even with breast cancer, 97% of women who are diagnosed with breast cancer early in stage 1 will effectively be cured, which is just staggering. If I could have known that when I was in medical school, it would have been I wouldn't have believed it.
No, I'm sure not.
We used to talk about 5-year survival data. And what I always remind people is that's always by definition 5 years out of date. And constantly making progress. But as we talked about, the most important steps that people need to take are the steps that get themselves the care and the help that they need and the support. I think you did a great job talking about how women need support from others. And sometimes maybe too many of the times, we don't put ourselves high enough on our to-do list. We certainly don't set boundaries that you talked about. We certainly don't do a good job doing that. And too often we turn to unhealthy ways of rewarding ourselves or coping or feeling better, whether that's we talked about turning to food, but certainly many of us turn to excessive screen time and we're not getting enough sleep. Many people turn to drugs and alcohol. Many people are turning to things as though they were drugs, even though they're not drugs. And sometimes those are foods or drinks. And sometimes those are just unhealthy behaviors. So I think you've done a great job getting everybody on the step towards better organizing their lives and their healthcare. And I thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And can I tell you one quick secret?
Absolutely. You can tell me 4 secrets.
I'll just, it's one for right now. But if I were stuck in a ladies' room, I'd love to be stuck with you. You are so relatable and so, informational. Thank you. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all we have time for today. But let's keep the conversation going on Twitter or Facebook at Dr. Donica. And please join us next week for another episode of In the Ladies' Room with Dr. Donica. Real conversations with real women about really intimate topics.